Clarity in communication is one of the most underestimated aspects of human interaction, yet it shapes almost every first impression and ongoing relationship dynamic. Most people assume that being likable depends on saying the right thing, using the right tone, or carefully choosing words that avoid conflict or misunderstanding. But in reality, confusion, not disagreement, is what usually weakens communication. When a person speaks without clarity, they often believe they are being polite or considerate. They soften their intentions, add extra explanations, or leave sentences open-ended to avoid pressure. On the surface, this seems thoughtful, but psychologically, it creates uncertainty for the listener. The brain naturally tries to fill in gaps when information is unclear, and that mental effort creates distance instead of connection. Clarity removes that effort. When someone says something simple and direct, the listener does not need to decode meaning or guess intention. The message arrives cleanly without friction. This creates a sense of ease in the interaction, because clarity reduces cognitive load. People feel more relaxed when they do not have to interpret hidden layers in conversation. But clarity is not just about being direct. It is also about being honest with yourself before you speak. Many unclear messages come from internal hesitation, rather than communication skill. When a person is unsure of their own intention, their words naturally reflect that uncertainty. This is why improving clarity externally often starts with internal awareness. For example, instead of thinking, maybe I should say something like we could hang out sometime if she's free, clarity would shift the thought into something more grounded. I would like to see her again, and I will express that directly. The difference is not aggression or dominance. It is internal certainty expressed externally in a simple form. In everyday interactions, clarity also builds respect, not because it is forceful, but because it is honest. People generally respond better when they feel they are not being misled or kept in ambiguity. Even if they do not agree with the message, they can understand it clearly, and that understanding creates stability in the interaction. Over time, people who communicate with clarity tend to experience fewer misunderstandings, fewer emotional misreads, and more straightforward relationships. This is not because their life becomes easier in a superficial sense, but because they are no longer adding unnecessary complexity to simple interactions. Clarity in its most refined form is not about saying more. It is about removing everything that is not necessary. Emotional awareness in communication is what transforms simple interaction into meaningful connection. It is the ability to recognize that words alone are never the full message. People are constantly reading tone, intention, timing, and subtle signals that sit behind what is being said. When emotional awareness is missing, even correct words can feel flat, distant, or self-centered. But when it is present, even simple sentences carry depth and warmth. Most people naturally focus on what they want to say. Very few pause to consider what the other person is experiencing while the conversation unfolds. This is where communication starts to separate itself between those who are simply speaking and those who are actually connecting. Emotional awareness is not about overthinking every word. It is about noticing the emotional state of the interaction itself. Is the other person relaxed or guarded? Is the moment light or serious? Is there openness or hesitation? These small observations shape how your message is received more than the message itself. For example, if someone expresses interest in meeting again, that statement can land in very different ways depending on emotional awareness. A direct sentence without awareness might feel mechanical, like a scheduled request. But when the same idea is delivered with attention to the shared experience, it becomes more human. Saying something like noticing that the conversation felt easy or natural shows that you are not just thinking about outcome, but also acknowledging the quality of interaction that already exists. That recognition makes the other person feel seen rather than approached. Emotional awareness also prevents communication from becoming one-sided. When someone only focuses on their own intention, the interaction can start to feel like pressure, even if that is not the goal. But when there is balance between expressing intention and recognizing the other person's presence, communication feels more comfortable. It becomes less about convincing and more about sharing. There is also an important internal effect. When a person develops emotional awareness, they become less reactive. They are not rushing to fill silence or force direction. Instead, they allow the interaction to breathe. This creates space for authenticity because nothing feels rushed or imposed. In that space, people tend to respond more openly because they feel less controlled and more understood. Another key aspect is that emotional awareness strengthens consistency between words and energy. If someone speaks with interest but their tone feels detached, the mismatch reduces trust in the message. But when emotional awareness is present, the tone naturally aligns with intention. The communication becomes smoother, not because it is rehearsed, but because it is tuned to the moment. Over time, this way of communicating changes how people experience you. They may not remember the exact sentences, but they remember the feeling of being understood without being overwhelmed. That feeling is what creates lasting impressions in human interaction. Alignment between words, tone, and behavior is one of the most important yet least consciously understood elements of human communication. It is the point where what a person says either becomes believable or quietly loses its impact. People often assume communication is mainly about choosing the right words, but in reality, human perception is far more sensitive to consistency than vocabulary. Every message carries three layers at the same time: the words themselves, the way they are spoken, and the physical presence behind them. When all three layers match, communication feels natural and trustworthy. When they do not match, the listener may not always be able to explain why, but something feels off. This off feeling is usually the result of misalignment. For example, a person might say something confident, but their body language is closed or tense. Or they might express interest, but their tone carries hesitation. In such cases, the brain of the listener tends to trust nonverbal signals more than spoken language. This is because humans are biologically wired to detect inconsistency as a form of uncertainty. Long before language developed, reading body cues was essential for safety and social understanding. Alignment is not about acting confident or forcing a certain posture. It is about reducing internal contradiction. When a person is internally certain about what they are expressing, their tone naturally stabilizes, their posture relaxes, their timing becomes smoother. Nothing feels performed because nothing is being divided between intention and expression. In everyday communication, lack of alignment often shows up subtly. Someone may try to sound interested but looks distracted, or they may try to appear relaxed while internally rushing the conversation forward. These small gaps create tension in how the message is received. Even if the words are positive, the overall impression becomes unclear. On the other hand, aligned communication feels effortless to receive. There is no need to interpret hidden meaning or question sincerity. The message feels complete because it is supported on every level. This creates a sense of ease in interaction, which is often more important than the content itself. Another important aspect of alignment is timing within speech. Pauses, pacing, and rhythm all contribute to how authenticity is perceived. When someone rushes through important statements, it can signal discomfort or lack of confidence. When someone slows down naturally at key moments, it allows their words to settle and carry more weight. This is not a technique, but a reflection of internal calm. Alignment also influences how people remember you. Most individuals do not recall exact phrasing from conversations, but they do remember the consistency of how someone made them feel. If there is alignment, the impression is stable and clear. If there is misalignment, the memory becomes vague or uncertain. Over time, improving alignment is less about changing how you act and more about reducing internal noise. When intention, emotion, and expression begin to move in the same direction, communication stops feeling like effort. It becomes a direct reflection of presence, where what is said and what is felt are no longer separate things. Alignment between what someone says, how they say it, and how they behave in the moment is only fully understood when it is applied in real communication situations, especially under social pressure or emotional stakes. In theory, it sounds simple, but in practice, it is where most people unconsciously break consistency. They may know what they want to say, but their timing, tone, or physical presence does not fully support it. This creates a subtle gap that changes how the message is received. In real interactions, emotional pressure often shifts behavior. For example, when someone wants to make a good impression, they may rush their words or over-explain their intention. When someone feels uncertain, they might soften their statements too much or avoid eye contact. When someone is overly focused on outcome, their tone becomes tense even if their words are polite. These small shifts are not always noticed consciously, but they are strongly felt by the other person. This is why alignment is not a fixed state but a dynamic process. It must hold even when the internal state changes slightly. A person might feel nervous, but still speak calmly. They might feel excited, but still maintain grounded delivery. The goal is not to eliminate emotion, but to prevent emotion from distorting expression. In real-life conversations, alignment becomes most visible in simple moments. A person inviting someone out, giving an opinion, or responding to a question all reveal whether their internal state and external expression are connected. When aligned, Even a simple sentence carries weight because it feels stable. When misaligned, even strong words lose impact because they feel uncertain or inconsistent. Another important aspect is that alignment is not about perfection in behavior. It is about coherence. A relaxed posture does not need to be rigidly maintained, and a calm voice does not need to be artificially controlled. What matters is that nothing in the communication contradicts the intention behind it. The moment effort becomes visible, alignment starts to weaken because the interaction shifts from natural expression to performance. People often underestimate how quickly others detect inconsistency. Human perception is highly sensitive to microsignals, such as hesitation in voice, changes in pacing, or unnecessary repetition of words. These signals often reveal more than the content itself. This is why someone can say the right thing but still not create the intended impression. It is not the sentence that fails, but the alignment behind it. In more developed communication, alignment creates a sense of reliability. Others do not feel like they are decoding mixed messages. Instead, they experience clarity through consistency. This builds trust in a subtle way, because the interaction feels predictable in a positive sense. Not predictable as in boring, but predictable as in stable and easy to understand. Over time, practicing alignment shifts communication away from performance-based interaction. Instead of trying to manage perception, the focus moves toward being internally consistent. This reduces pressure and creates more natural conversations. The more aligned a person becomes, the less effort they need to spend controlling how they are perceived, because their presence already communicates stability on its own. Timing in communication is one of the most overlooked elements in human interaction, yet it often determines whether a message feels natural or forced. People usually focus on what they want to say, but very few pay attention to when it is said. The same sentence can carry completely different meaning, depending on the moment it is delivered. Timing is what turns communication from mechanical exchange into something that feels alive and responsive to the situation. In everyday conversations, timing is constantly at work in subtle ways. A pause before responding can create space for thoughtfulness, while rushing a reply can signal discomfort or lack of confidence. A well-placed silence can sometimes express more than words, because it allows the emotional tone of the moment to settle. When timing is ignored, communication becomes slightly misaligned with the natural rhythm of interaction, even if the words themselves are correct. Many people make the mistake of filling every gap in conversation. They feel the need to respond immediately, explain further, or continue speaking just to avoid silence. However, silence is not a problem in communication. In many cases, it is a necessary part of it. It gives both people time to process what has been said. It also allows emotional tone to stabilize, making the interaction feel more grounded rather than rushed. Timing also influences how sincerity is perceived. When something meaningful is said too quickly, it can feel rehearsed or automatic, but when the same message is delivered after a natural pause, it carries more weight. The delay is not artificial, it signals presence. It shows that the person is not simply reacting, but actually considering the moment before responding. Another important aspect of timing is knowing when not to speak at all. Some of the strongest communication happens through restraint. Choosing to stay quiet in certain moments can communicate confidence, awareness, and emotional control. It shows that a person is not dependent on constant verbal output to validate their presence in the interaction. In social dynamics, timing also affects how intentions are received. When someone expresses interest too early or too quickly, it can feel overwhelming. But when the same expression comes after a natural buildup of interaction, it feels more balanced and appropriate. This is not about strategy, but about sensitivity to emotional pacing. Good timing is also closely connected to listening. People who truly listen tend to respond more accurately because they are not preparing their next sentence while the other person is still speaking. They are present in the moment, which allows their response to naturally fit the flow of conversation instead of interrupting it. Over time, improved timing changes the overall quality of communication. Conversations feel less rushed and more intentional. There is less pressure to perform and more space to respond naturally. Instead of forcing direction, the interaction develops its own rhythm, and the person becomes part of that rhythm rather than trying to control it.